Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, more survivors share their stories on the tragic plane crash in Sulu as authorities uncover the plane's flight recorder, hoping to know what went wrong. Senators want to dig deeper on the C-130 crash. The DOH reverts to its policy of giving LGUs the prerogative to require COVID-19 tests for fully vaccinated travelers. And later, President Rodrigo Duterte floats the idea of running for the 2022 elections. Senator Risa Hontiveros joins us live. Survivors of the ill-fated C-130 plane are giving more details on the deadly plane crash in Sulu last Sunday. An investigation is underway. The United States will also help analyze the plane's flight data recorder to discover more about the aircraft's final moments. Senators want to know more about the accident to determine what can be done to prevent tragedies of this sort. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have Senator Risa Hontiveros. Senator Hontiveros, welcome to the source. Good to have you again, ma'am.
Thank you, Pinky. Thanks for inviting me.
So let's start with the plane crash. Investigation, of course, still ongoing on the cause of the plane crash in Sulu. Should the Senate investigate this?
Well, Pinky, unang-una na lubos na pakikiramay sa mga pamilya na namatayan sa tragic plane crash na iyon, and gayon din sa Armed Forces of the Philippines. I think, Pinky, with the grief, that's so expansive, including not only us in the Senate, but our whole country, that the Senate would be willing to help, to do our part in finding out the facts of this terrible tragedy. I really hope that a closer investigation of this matter will ensure the protection of our brave men and women in uniform moving forward. Considering this is already the second crash in a couple of weeks, it would really be a service to our armed services if we were to leave them vulnerable in their future deployments to this kind of accident. Let's do better, alam mo, Pinky, let's do better in protecting the people who are giving their all to protect our country and our people. And immediately government ensure that all benefits accruing to these persons who were killed be given to their families, and that full military honors be accorded them when they are buried.
I'm sure a lot of people will agree with you that we need to protect those people protecting us more. You mentioned this is the second in a few weeks. This is actually also the fourth crash this year. I guess the question is, pang-apat na ho kasi ito itong taon. Paano ho kaya ito mapiprevent from happening again?
Well, we really have to get to the bottom of what happened here. Kasi sabi halimbawa ni Major General Arevalo, the plane was in tip-top shape. He says tip-top shape, and had 11,000 flying hours remaining before its next scheduled maintenance. So kumbaga, dapat in good flying condition siya. My colleagues are also really aghast. Pinky, this has already been described as the worst air disaster in recent Philippine military history. So yung black box na iyon na na-recover, can we find out what actually transpired in the last hour, the last minutes of the flight of that C-130 and the lives of all of those of our kababayan? The death toll is now at 52, according to Defense Secretary Lorenzana. 3 of them civilians, including those who were on the ground. But the C-130 itself was carrying 96 military personnel and mostly new recruits, no? So a lot of young people also, Pinky, who were being deployed for combat against the Sulu of the Abu Sayyaf. So my colleagues are already also pointing out various angles of this tragic accident that we need to get to the bottom of, so as to prevent recurrences, measures to be put in place to make our military planes safe, as Grace has also said. My colleague in the minority, Sem Kiko, shares our calls about preventing a recurrence of this tragedy. My colleague from the majority, my mista, Sem Doroy de la Rosa, reminds us that those C-130s are sometimes called flying coffins or widow makers. So how do we take a hard look at the reality of all those costs in comparison to the better funding we must give, for example, to military modernization? He makes an interesting point about foreign debt that we may occur as a result of that modernization. Well, there's a lot there that bears further study or scrutiny, Pinky. And Sandit
Yeah.
also says we need to improve our maintenance of this plane and continuous training of our troops to obviate loss of life, manpower, and material. So there are several angles all in that, Pinky, that we have to look
That need to look.
at for recurrences.
Would you say, Senator, that the modernization of the AFP has not really been prioritized? Would you say that, or napaprioridad naman po pero kulang?
I think napaprioridad naman, Pinky, and more over the past budget cycles in terms of the AFP modernization plan, in terms of making sure that the BCDA proceeds that rightfully should go to the AFP go to them. But there are other areas where we must improve even the implementation of this military modernization. And some of the recent points I've raised are in terms of the profile and the budgeting within the whole AFP budget for our Philippine Navy, being an archipelagic nation, and followed, of course, by the Philippine Air Force, in light not only of deployments within our country, such as happened recently, this accident, but also in terms of our external defense. Engaging China, for example, in the West Philippine Sea, where again, the Philippine Air Force and especially the Philippine Navy, backed up with the Coast Guard and the BFAR and our own fisher folk, are really frontliners. So how do we keep these frontliners fully equipped and safe, including when they take flights like on this recent C-130?
So kung magkaroon po ng investigation, Senator, when I guess this will happen after the President's State of the Nation address, do you think this needs to be prioritized?
I do think it needs to be prioritized, Pinky, kasi parang nagsasama-sama dito ang maraming urgent at importanteng issue. So unang-una na, keeping our men and women in uniform safe as they are deployed to different parts of our country. Tapos yung pagtingin sa paano talaga i-improve institutionally yung Philippine Air Force at yung Philippine Navy vis-a-vis yung Philippine Army, also in the context of our external defense priorities, including turning back China's panghihimasok dito sa ating territory, their exploitation of our natural resources, and their abuse and bullying of our own fisher folk in their traditional fishing grounds, even within our own exclusive economic zones. So this tragedy highlights and brings together many urgent and important issues that we need to attend to, both in terms of honoring the memory of these many people, including many young people serving in the armed forces who have lost their lives unnecessarily, and in terms also of the other national interests of the Filipino people as a whole that are at stake and have been so dramatically and tragically highlighted again with this crash.
Senator Risa Hontiveros, we need to take a very short break. The Source will be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our guest today is Senator Risa Hontiveros. I want to talk about some IATF policies that have been, they have made a decision on and has caused possibly some sort of confusion. Let me start with the no testing policy for vaccinated individuals. The DOH already clarified that the policy on vaccinated individuals traveling domestically will still be up to the LGUs if they actually require testing. So I guess what I wanted to find out from you, Senator Risa, is that kayo ho ba nalito dito dahil kailangan ho ba talaga ng PCR? Hindi ho ba talaga kailangan ng PCR? O talagang it's up to the LGU to decide on this?
Medyo nalito din ako, Pinky, tulad ng marami nating kababayan, at na-whiplash ako sa bilis ng mga pagbabago ng policy on the testing, even on ano nga bang health status ng Pilipinas vis-a-vis COVID-19. I think IATF needs to be reminded, as we've been reminding them from the beginning, to be cognizant of the frontline role played by the LGUs in flattening the curve on COVID-19. Bukod sa meron tayong local government code, the LGUs are really on the ground and have been doing the yeoman's or yo person's job since the start of the pandemic to contain community transmission in their own jurisdictions. At saka dahil sila ang nagtatakda ng klase ng quarantine sa area nila, kasama yung testing policy doon. Also from the very start of the pandemic, Pinky, both WHO and the DOH itself have been telling us that even when, for example, the vaccination is fully rolled out, even when we shall be approaching herd immunity, hindi po garantiya yan na hindi na tayo mahahawa sa COVID o hindi na tayo makahawa sa iba, right? The vaccines will essentially, very importantly, but simply reduce the severity of the infection. So ibig sabihin, even if and when we are fully vaccinated as individuals and eventually as a country, testing can and will remain an important part of totally flattening the curve because it will indicate pa rin kung tayo ay nahawa at tayo ay makakahawa pa rin, even if to a milder degree. So it was really confusing and actually disturbing for that kind of policy to even emanate from the IATF. Kahit
So,
dali-dali.
what are you saying, Senator? Kayo po, you are in favor of still undergoing PCR testing for domestic travel or interzonal travel? Is that what you're saying, ma'am?
Whether it's PCR testing as the so-called gold standard of tests or other kinds of tests in combination to give national and local governments snapshots of our health status vis-a-vis COVID-19 at any one point. The point is that if the policy at the LGU level within the general health protocols laid out by the IATF, if the policy at the LGU level is still to conduct a test or certain tests, those must be followed in order to be most responsive to the local COVID-19 conditions on the ground. And yes, even as we are approaching that far off horizon of herd immunity, and yes, even as we probably in the next few years still have to contend with actually flattening the curve of COVID-19 in our country.
Do you think that prior to such protocols or policies, that the IATF should consult LGUs para po hindi nagre-react yung LGUs and launch an appeal towards certain policies called by the IATF?
Definitely, Pinky. And that has been a plaint and a complaint of many LGU officials from the start of the pandemic. Kailangan magkonsulta ang IATF sa kanila rin in coming out with national policies and protocols that they then cascade down to the LGUs. Mula sa simula din ng pandemic, Pinky, I've been saying that one of the important principles to be observed and to be achieved is to have COVID-ready, pandemic-ready LGUs kasi yung kanilang local health governance are the important pieces of the national response and will be the important pieces of the national achievement of flattening the curve when we can actually achieve that.
But, going back really to this vaccinated individuals, I do remember that the DOH was saying that it can, if you are fully vaccinated, which is of course 2 weeks after your second dose, it can be an alternative. So I know that's the word they use, an alternative, so as not to take an RT-PCR test. But at some point, I also did read that it's also up to the LGU if they will require the RT-PCR test or not. So that might have caused some confusion also because many probably just thought vaccinated ka, hindi ka na kailangan ng RT-PCR. But then it also goes back to the LGU. So pag-uusapan daw nila to ngayon, Senator Hontiveros sa IATF. And another thing that they are going to talk about, because I had Secretary Duque yesterday, is that yung pong Delta variant. I wanted to get your thoughts on this because I asked Secretary Duque, 7 countries are banned right now, no? Travelers from 7 countries are banned from entering the country due to the Delta variant. I asked him if Indonesia could be included. Sabi niya, pag-uusapan daw yan ngayong araw at posible din daw Malaysia. What I want to find out from you is, palagay niyo ho ba proactive enough ang ating IATF with regards to this yung sa Delta variant, because it is present already in about 98 countries or so.
And in addition to the Delta variant, Pinky, we have news about the Delta Plus and the Lambda variants. My God, we're slowly inching our way through the Greek alphabet. And from the start, since last year, unfortunately, IATF has not been proactive and timely enough in imposing temporary travel bans from certain countries most affected by the original and then the subsequent variants. So mabuti naman pag-uusapan nila kung i-expand yung travel ban na iyon sa ibang mga bansa which are becoming more and more affected by these new variants. Kailangan din natin pag-aralan, Pinky, yung experiences ng mga bansang iyon, Malaysia, Indonesia, about their healthcare workers who have been vaccinated with certain vaccines and yet still gotten severe cases, even unfortunately some deaths from COVID-19. So regarding the travel bans, kailangan ay bukod sa timely travel bans, sumabay din dito sa dumaraming mga variants yung supply ng ating mga bakuna in order to give our a minimum level of protection against severe versions of these different variants that are appearing on the scene.
Which is actually where I wanted to go. So the arrival of the vaccines has been delayed this July. Sinovac, which was supposed to have had supplies every week, Secretary Galvez already said that this may happen third week of July. Yung pong Sputnik, about 170,000 delayed again. I know it was supposed to arrive Tuesday night and then Wednesday night and then delayed again. So what we have right now is this. Let's look at the data. About 3 million individuals fully vaccinated. Out of that, the 3 million, on top of that rather, 9 million have had their first dose, more or less 9 million. How is the government so far doing in its vaccination drive? Because even the WHO representative sabi naman that remarkable because it needs to be factored in that the supply is really limited.
Supply is really limited this year, Pinky. But if we had started negotiating last year, if we had made reservations, if given the inadequacy of funds, which is still also questionable and subject of a resolution for special audit that I filed to properly account for the public funds used in our COVID-19 pandemic response, including in procuring the vaccines. If we had acted earlier on that procurement, then we may still have had a supply problem now, but very probably less so. Well, on the other hand, mabuting balita rin na pumapalo na sa milyon yung mga nabakunahang Pilipino laban sa COVID-19. As of the June 30 DOH report, total doses administered were 10,700,000 plus. The first dose accounting for 8 million of those, and the completed 2 accounting for 2.7 million of those doses. But kailangan pa rin siguraduhin ng gobyerno na stable yung supply ng bakuna para yung momentum. There are more and more LGUs, Pinky, who are saying, we are here, we are very willing and able, we have our own modest cold chain storage facilities. We have high vaccine confidence here in our LGU. We have vaccinators ready to be deployed, but the supply is coming in fits and starts, in trickles. At sila talaga ay regularly nagfa-follow up sa IATF for more of their supply. Kasi malayo pa rin tayo, Pinky, no, sa target o bilang ng porsyento ng populasyon natin na kailangang maprotektahan. Despite the fact that millions have been vaccinated already, but per the latest reports, we are still far from that. So nakakabahala talaga itong malayo pa yung agwat ng bilang o porsyento ng nakumpleto ng bakuna. Herd immunity would say that we actually need to administer not just 500,000 doses a day, but 720,000 plus doses daily, or 2.9 times, almost 3 times our current rate in order to reach OH's own herd immunity target by December 31 of this year. So against that 727,000 target that we should be setting, we're actually administering an average of only 247,000 plus doses daily. At this rate, Pinky, it'll take us 1.4 years or until December of next year, 2022, to fully vaccinate the 70 million Filipinos we need to vaccinate to achieve herd immunity. So, bilis-bilisan natin yung rate natin.
Here's where I just wanted to go before we go on another break, Senator. A number of LGUs have actually suspended the vaccination for the first dose because of supply issues. The mandate, the memorandum coming from Secretary Galvez is, let's concentrate on those who have actually had their first dose. Tapusin na natin, kumbaga, yung first dose para, yung naka-first dose para ma-fully protect na sila kahit papano. Ngayon, tinanong ko po si Secretary Duque, yung supply para sa mga bakuna, pagka dumating, pwedeng iturok yon for the first dose for those individuals. I guess where I wanted to go with this is, now that we've opened up the economy, all sectors are almost all sectors are open. Meron ho ba kayong pangamba na dahil nagkakaroon pa rin tayo ng supply issues, ay baka muling tumaas ang mga kaso given there's a Delta plus, and a Lambda, where the WHO already is saying this Delta variant is concentrating on unvaccinated individuals.
So I guess, Pinky, this is another big area where the IATF and LGUs have to synchronize their policies, and not just the LGUs, but the private sector as well. Sa kabila ng mga supply deficiencies, pati mga private companies nag-step up simula pa nung nakaraang taon hanggang ngayon, and observing the protocols about the tripartite agreements. They've also been their share, like the LGUs, to procure their own additional supplies. At dahil nga dito sa iba't ibang mga sektor ng ekonomiya natin, sabi mo nga, Pinky, nagbubukas ulit without firm guarantees yet about, for example, the principles in my Balik Trabahong Ligtas bill to ensure health protocols in the workplaces and also in transit, in the public transport, service contracting of public utility vehicles for our employees and laborers to and from work. So it seems like, we have a puzzle whose design we've known from the start since last year, na dapat nandyan yung magaling na testing, tracing, isolating or quarantining, and treatment. Plus ngayon, yung fifth life-saving piece of the puzzle, yung vaccination. But on all these 5 fronts, we're not doing well enough, or enough quantitatively, and then well enough qualitatively. Kailangan, let's up our game, no? Ika nga, let's step up so that we can put these pieces together with clear, consistent, non-confusing policies from IATF that can be implemented down the line by the LGUs, given their own tweaking or nuancing of those protocols to suit local conditions, so that indeed we can, walang kamatayang, flatten the curve of the pandemic and reasonably and safely open up the economy so that we can save more jobs, save more MSMEs, save the lives of Filipino families who've been facing poverty and hunger. Ang daming kailangan gawin, but we've known these from last
Okay.
year. So,
Okay, we need to take another short break. The source will be right back. We're back on the source. Senator, mabilisang tanong at sagot. Ang dami ko pang tanong. Ito, first, I wanted to get your reaction. Sabi po ni Secretary Bello, do away with the licensure, the bar and board exams, especially for nursing professionals. Do you agree dapat pong tanggalin ito?
ako, tanungin din muna nila yung professional communities of those professions, the law, medicine, kasi what purpose do those board exams, do the bar exams play? Baka more essential than the good secretary thinks. And considering galing siya sa isa sa mga profesyong iyon din.
Opo. Okay. The President Rodrigo Duterte saying he's seriously considering running for VP. Are you getting a sense really of what the President wants to do in 2022?
Sana magdalawang isip si Presidente dyan. It simply flies in the face of the constitutional provisions na dapat alam nila bilang isang abogado rin. At saka ano pa ba yung ipagpapatuloy nila? I mean, natupad na ba niya yung mga pangako niya with only 365 days left to go? I mean, if you look at even his centerpiece program, the build, it's fallen far short, has been attended by other issues. For example, the loans and the ODA from China. We don't want any midnight deals here, ha, Pinky? Baka nire-negotiate na yung ibang mga proyekto na hindi maitutuloy, hindi makukumpleto. But many of these should pass through clear legislative scrutiny. Looking at JC Punong Bayan's article in Rappler, that BBP is really called into question, no? With 75 flagship projects not online anymore, only half of them are still online. At sa seryosong pagmamasahe ng mga datos nila, to take big unfeasible projects off the list, to include non-infra projects, non-physical infra projects, for example, like the national ID system, and then simply credit grabbing from previous administrations by simply stamping BBB on them. So is this the kind of legacy that the president wants to continue with a second term? I don't think bending the Constitution is at all a proper way to go here, Pinky.
And as a last question, you are running. Can you confirm that you're running for re-election in 2022?
Yes, I am, Pinky.
All right. Senator Risa Hontiveros, ma'am, maraming salamat po sa inyong oras.
Okay.
And thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.